Welcome in, everybody, to CFB Nation All-America podcast. My name is Bill Trocchi, senior editor at sportingnews.com, joined as always by Bill Bender, lead college football writer at sportingnews.com. And Bill, we are coming off a week 11 that saw a lot of big developments, but first we have to talk about something that's kind of gripping the whole college football world on a sad note. Of course, the shooting at the University of Virginia that occurred on Sunday night. 3 Virginia football players died in the shooting. Lavelle Davis Jr., Devin Chandler, Deshaun Perry. 2 other students are in the hospital right now as a result of the shooting, the on-campus shooting in a parking garage. One is running back Mike Hollins. The second hospitalized student has not been identified yet. Mike Hollins has undergone surgery, and he was on a ventilator. And he was undergoing a second surgery. We're recording this Tuesday morning. He is undergoing a second surgery Tuesday morning. So, it's just a very, very sad situation, needless to say. It's affected college football all over the country, all kinds of statements coming out from people. And Ross Dellinger of Sports Illustrated was in Charlottesville yesterday, and he covered the vigil and the memorials and, talked to some people and did a really good job with it. And, it was just, it's a reminder. Obviously, there's a heck of a lot more to life than college football, but it's also a reminder that there's more to college football than college football, but more than the games, more than the between the lines. And, in this case, I guess you can say the 3 families, the 3 that are going through this just unbelievable tragedy, have more support and understanding as they go through this, because their sons were involved in college football, and hopefully they can get a little comfort from all the support they are getting from the University of Virginia.
Oh, and they'll get it from Virginia Tech too. I mean, obviously that's a campus that had a shooting several years ago. And I remember when college football kind of rallied around Virginia Tech as well. And then we get into, it's just a reminder to me that as we get into rivalry week, which is coming next week, and you play these games that last 365 days a year, that, that sometimes these communities can be there for each other. It's obviously a horrible incident. It's obviously, I can't even imagine being the father of 2, and just putting yourself in those people's positions. And, hopefully, I don't know if they'll play. I mean, that's the other thing. I don't know. There's no plans to cancel as of now. So you would anticipate that if Virginia does play this weekend, and it's secondary that if they do, that there'll be a pretty emotional moment when they play Coastal Carolina this weekend. Because, I mean, obviously, as a teammate, you're missing 3 of your guys, 5 of your guys. And can't imagine. So, your heart goes out to all the people at Virginia, the football program, the student body, the coaches, and just hopefully we don't have to, I would say hopefully we don't never have to do this again, but, this is part of our country's fabric, for better or worse. It's not just, this doesn't just happen in football. It happens all the time.
Right. And the Virginia men's basketball team had a home game Monday night that they canceled against Northern Iowa. I would imagine they'll ask the players what they want to do at some point. There's no timeline for a decision yet. I checked Coastal Carolina's website this morning to see if Jamie Chadwell had any kind of a statement. He's probably waiting to see what happens. They're going to be sympathetic to the situation, and we'll see what happens there. But just wanted to kind of, acknowledge that. And, it's, like I said, a reminder that, we're all focused on the games and stuff, but, there's a lot to college football. And, sometimes in times of tragedy, it can be a good thing for people who need support. So as we kick off, this is our first of 3 podcasts this week. We are going to go over the events from last weekend here in this Tuesday podcast. Wednesday, we will go over the new rankings from the College Football Rankings Show tonight, which is at halftime of the not halftime, in between the games of the Champions Classic in college basketball out in Indianapolis. So their show is not till 9 o'clock tonight, roughly. depending on how long the Kentucky-Michigan State game goes, on ESPN. And then Thursday's show, we will preview the upcoming weekend, which is going to be a Pac-12 bonanza. 2 huge games in the Pac-12 this weekend. Let's start with the Pac-12 race because there was a couple of big games last weekend in the Pac-12. We look at the race now. UCLA got their second loss. Oregon got their second loss. 2 great, exciting games right down to the wire, right down to the last play, basically. That leaves USC as the only one-loss team still standing. USC, they've been fortunate, right? There's 4 other good teams in the Pac-12 besides USC, and USC has not played Washington, has not played Oregon, has not played UCLA, and the only good team, supposedly, that they played in the Pac-12 was Utah, and they got beat. So nice scheduling break for the Trojans to miss Oregon and Washington this year, and they've avoided UCLA till this weekend. What do you see out of USC? Should there be some concern now that the level of competition is ramping up?
No, because it's an opportunity. I mean, I have talked this through with you and some others, and I think if USC wins out, I think they could take that last playoff spot because they're going to be in the light for the next 3 weeks. I think it would be enough if they beat UCLA, turn around, beat Notre Dame, and then beat the Utah-Oregon winner. That would be enough to maybe leapfrog USC or Tennessee for the last playoff spot because they will have a conference championship and Tennessee doesn't. And they have Caleb Williams, and he's a Heisman candidate just like Hendon Hooker. The biggest concern I had for USC is they lost Travis Dye, their leading rusher, to a gruesome knee injury the other night. And, that means Austin Jones has to step up. You and I have talked about this a lot during the year that we think maybe UCLA might be the better team. And yet watching them Saturday night in that late night game, I mean, that was bad. That was a really bad loss for and they caught a hot quarterback in Jaden DeLora, but it's a pretty flagrant loss. And Oregon, same deal. I mean, you and I were talking through that game. Like, that turned out to be the best game Saturday, and they found a way to lose a game that they shouldn't have lost. So if you're Oregon and UCLA, you have to get back off the mat after tremendous missed opportunities. So I think one of them will, but we can get into that later in the week. But I think USC, it's all right in front of them. I think they'll be in the playoff if they win out.
So they'll jump the Big Ten loser.
It's USC. That's the other part of it they have working in their favor is it's Lincoln Riley. How many times has he done this out? It's just doing the same thing he did with the new uniform on. They're a huge brand. It pulls that part of the country in. But we'll wait and see who loses that Ohio State-Michigan game, because if it's Michigan, USC's non-con schedule's better than Michigan's. Like, the USC's non-con schedule is, and I think for those that don't stay up and watch Caleb Williams every week, he's, to me, every bit as good as C.J. Stroud. He is. I mean, and he's every bit as good as Hendon Hooker, and he's every bit as good as Drake May. Like, those should be the 4 finalists, and maybe if they have a 5th. I mean, Blake Corum has a chance too. Those are the 5 guys right there. And now that I say all that, their defense is a problem, though. And if UCLA sticks with the run with Charbonnet and Robinson, they can win this game this week.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be fun. Let's talk for a second on that Washington-Oregon game. I mean, that was just one of the games of the year to me. I thought Washington drives all the way down the red zone, throws an interception. Oregon takes over their 1-yard line, drives all the way down the field, and then they get stopped for the field goal. Bo Nix is hurt. Michael Penix makes one of the great touchdown passes, 60-yard touchdown or whatever it was for a touchdown. Washington takes the lead, and then Dan Lanning has his backup quarterback in there, and Dan Lanning turns into a first-year coach. It was first-year coach versus first-year coach. But Dan Lanning, Bo Nix was ready to go in, wanted to go in on that 4th down. Were you surprised that Lanning didn't call timeout to get Bo Nix back in the game and try to run something with Bo Nix at the controls there?
Yeah, I mean, but that's rookie mistake. I mean, that game was over until Bo Nix on that 3rd down on the drive before he gets dinged up or gets cramp, whatever. And that drive had basically taken the entire 4th quarter off the table. And then they give up one. It's just how quickly these things can happen. It's, one deep pass, one fumble, and all of a sudden Oregon's out of the playoff. And it's unfortunate for them. Yeah, like you said, game of the year. Yeah, it's right up there with
Alabama, Tennessee. I mean, Alabama, LSU. They were there. It belongs in that conversation. North Carolina, App State.
Yep.
App State scores 40 points in the fourth quarter and loses.
It is. It's definitely top 3. And I mean, I think the only game that I thought was better was Alabama, Tennessee. And that's the thing with the Pac-12 is like how many people, you and I were sitting there watching it. I don't know how much of the nation was like, I had a buddy text me the next day. He's like, Oregon lost ? And I'm like, you didn't watch? And he's like,
right.
no, yeah. Like he doesn't care. So, yeah, but again, it's Pac-12. This is part of the Pac-12 problem that not a lot of people are seeing this stuff and they just assume that the football isn't great out there. I don't think the football's elite, but I do think USC's got a chance. And those 4 teams we mentioned that played, and you grew up Utah in it, all solid teams that when you fill out your bowl card here in a month or so, they'll probably, if they get a good matchup, all 5 of those teams could win their bowl game.
All 5 of those teams. And then the 6th place team is Oregon State, and they gave USC everything they could handle. Right?
So,
that's the best team in the league USC has played, except for Utah, and they almost lost that one. So I don't know. I don't know how USC is going to stack up against UCLA and how they're going to stack up in the Pac-12 championship game. I think I have more questions than you do. Let's return to the Big Ten. 2 weeks from Michigan, Ohio State. You are in the thick of it, living just outside of Columbus, Ohio. Next week, you'll be going to some practices, some media availability. You'll be going to the game the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's a noon game, of course, like it always is. What is the feeling around there? And are people just, counting the days till that kickoff?
Oh, it's going to be awesome. I mean, obviously they're surprisingly a lot of the talk is, can the loser get in too? Which is preemptive to me. I would rather go win the game if I was one of those teams. It's going to be awesome. And you and I talked about this. I'm going to write about it next week. This narrative that my concern for this game is when they ditch divisions, they would have. Here's one thing with this game. If they move away from divisions, they may have to move this game, like Oklahoma and Oklahoma State did, and that's going to be one of the casualties of it. I don't think that more of this game is good for college football or for this conference. Because I just can't imagine these 2 teams going 11-0, playing each other, playing an emotional game on campus, and then having to run it back the next week. Neither side can imagine doing that. And that's what we're going to get into. But I think it kind of ropes into the UCLA USC thing. Once they come into the conference, if you keep the divisions, you can move some teams around. But in terms of just this game this year, it doesn't get much better. I mean, they're both probably going to be 11-0. One team, it's coming off. It's different from 2006 in that Michigan's coming off a win, and Michigan is coming to Ohio State with the best rushing offense. And if you watch Michigan games, they're boring. They're very boring, but you look up and it's like, oh, they won 34-3, and Nebraska did nothing. Their defense is awesome. Their offense is just turn around and run. And then Ohio State, people like to nitpick them each week. I mean, they're incredible. Their offense is great. Their defense has been better with Jim Knowles. They've got NFL guys all over the field. Marvin Harrison Jr., he could be a top 3 pick in a few years. He's that kind of receiver that he's actually going to be in that Calvin Johnson range of a draft pick. So yeah, I mean, I'm ready for it now, but they do have to take care of their business this week.
What Michigan, quick note, only team in the nation that has not trailed in the fourth quarter. In fact, they have not trailed in the final 23 minutes of any game this season. Only team to be able to make that claim. Ohio State trailed Penn State in the fourth quarter. Kind of late, 8 minutes to go. And then, of course, exploded for about 3 touchdowns in 2 minutes and put that one away quickly. What is your point spread for that game?
For the Big Ten championship game?
For the Michigan.
Ohio State, Michigan.
Predict the point spread. What is it? It's at Ohio State. Michigan has, like I said, not really been tested in the fourth quarter yet this year. What happens?
I missed this.
What's your spread?
I whiffed on this last year. I remember we played this game with our editor, Elliot Ponnell, and Ohio State 6.5. Maybe, yeah, Ohio State 6.5. They'll make it a touchdown. Like they'll put it on it. Because Michigan hasn't won there since 2000. And the last couple times they've played there, 2018 was just an obliteration. So, yeah, I think Ohio State Ohio State will be favored between 4 and 6. I would say 6.5, and it gets bet down to about 5-ish, 4.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. We'll see what happens there. Let's look at the other side of the conference, the Big Ten West. 4-way tie for first place right now, Bill. What is going to happen? Who do you think is going to win? All right, so let's go through the 4 teams. It's Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota are sitting there at 4 and 3. Purdue, Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota. Who is the best team out of those 4? And who would be best? What's best for the Big Ten?
Purdue.
What's big for the best Big Ten championship to represent the West against whoever wins that Michigan-Ohio State game?
Who's going to go is probably Iowa because they control their destiny, and I think they win their last 2 games. Who's best would be Purdue because at least they would throw it around and put on a little bit of a show against Ohio State and Michigan. Illinois just faded. Minnesota, none of it's best for the Big Ten. Like this leads into my last point. It's like it's kind of a double-edged sword for the Big Ten is that they can't really do this with Ohio State, Michigan because they have to protect the ratings on that game, which will be the most watched game. It'll be watched. They'll have more viewers than the SEC championship. I'll put that up against anybody. I mean, they'll have more viewers than Georgia beating LSU by 3 touchdowns, or 2 touchdowns,
especially if it's close.
Right, but it'll have a significantly more viewers than the Big Ten championship game too, and that's the other problem. So I think the right answer is USC and UCLA when they come in. They go to the West. No, they go to the West. You move Purdue to the East with Indiana. So they have their natural – yeah, I think that actually checks out. And then UCLA and USC, consistently you get one of them in Indianapolis against the Ohio State-Michigan winner. And if they have to realign divisions, great. But I don't know how they're going to do that with 16 teams. That we'll see. Because just putting all 16 teams together, you're creating like – in the spirit of the World Cup, you're creating like a Champions League of like confusing standings to me because not everybody's going to play everybody. So they do what do they call them in the World Cup? Pools. Groups. My bad.
Group A, Group B, Group C, etc. USA is in Group B, Bill. Group B. Keep your eye on it.
They're opening against Wales, correct?
Wales, England, and a 4th team that I cannot recall off the top of my head.
Yeah, we're up on our soccer, you can tell.
We will be, though. Sportingnews.com is all over.
They've got a ton of coverage coming. We've got really good soccer guys.
Yes, we do.
Mike DeCourcy's in on that. So anyway, enough soccer for now. I think Iowa, Ohio State is what it's going to end up, and that's not going to be good for the league because Ohio State's going to – what's the spread on that, Bill? I get to ask you this time.
Well, the first game was 54-10, so 44 points. I mean, it's not going to be 44, but it's going to be, I'd say 28.5.
24.
I mean, Iowa scored a defensive touchdown in that game and like played lights out after several turnovers and still lost by 44. Right. Ohio State did not play their best game in that game.
Right.
And still won by 44. That's the state of Iowa's offense right now. And so, yeah, I would bet it's at least 28-point spread, which is just crazy.
I don't think it'll be 20. It could be, but
it could be
24.5. Like that's because I think they would give Iowa a little, but they would still lose by that. I'd still take Ohio State.
What was the score last year? The Michigan-Iowa.
Bad. Yeah,
they at least 28 points, right?
I think the spread was around 17.
And the final score, it covered it easily.
Exactly. So it's a problem for the conference, but I think when USC, UCLA come in, they're going to reevaluate what they do. I do think they're going to protect Ohio State, Michigan, and I know you and I have disagreed on it a little bit. It's just my feeling is like I was talking to one of my buddies, Kyle Rowland. He's a fantastic writer at the Toledo Blade, by the way. And we were talking through this last night, and I said, I would be cool with it. I was like, I want Ohio State, Michigan to not go to the Big Ten championship, but I would be totally cool with it if they played in the playoff. Like, that's what the 12-team playoff is for. So, like, if they were on opposite sides of the bracket and they somehow got to the college football playoff championship game or the Final Four, like Duke and North Carolina, that's fine. I have a hard time with them playing. And I'll tell you a story real quick. When they played in 16, and I was there, and I was in the Michigan locker room or the press conference afterward, the one where Jim Harbaugh went like this and said, he was this short. And I caught him the question after, and I asked him something to the effect of, it was probably poorly worded, but like I said, were these the two best teams in the Big Ten in your opinion? But as in, like, do you still deserve a playoff berth? It was something like that. And he just kind of shook his head and he said, I have no idea. Because, after that game, their emotions he couldn't even calculate that question. He didn't care, because that's the game that matters. That game right in front of you and all the history behind it. So I want to protect that. And I think next week will be great. So trust me, we'll have plenty of coverage of Sporting News. I'm already on top of it. By the way, 7 times since 2000, 7 times, Bill, they would have met, if there was no divisions in the Big Ten, they would have played in a Big Ten championship game the following week. So 7 out, like about a third of the time. So
every 3 years.
And that's with Michigan taking a decade off of college football. Like, so that's what you don't, that's why I don't.
Yeah.
And that's so enough of that. We'll have more talk about that next week. I'll be amped up about it. But what's next? What do we talk about now? Well, we could talk about Michigan, Ohio State all day. You're going to get in trouble with that.
Quickly, I want to ask you, at what point do we start talking about Jimbo Fisher legitimately being on the hot seat? Because he's avoided all hot seat talk because his contract seems to be so prohibitive in terms of the buyout, what Texas A&M would owe him, the amount of guaranteed dollars. I've seen it's in the mid 80s, $85 million if they had to fire him right now. And, money is at some point it's an object to people. But at this point, I mean, these are some of the ugly numbers that I've seen on Jimbo Fisher. He's lost 9 of his last 11 to FBS opponents. He's 4 games behind Kevin Sumlin's 58-game record at Texas A&M. Kevin Sumlin, of course, was let go. Texas A&M gained 215 yards against Auburn in its latest loss. Auburn's defense was ranked 93rd in the country prior to that game, giving up 403 yards a game. Texas A&M barely had half of that. 12 straight games against FBS opponents. They've failed to score 30 points. Only one team in the country is worse than that. It's Stanford. And they will be the first team in 12 years to be ranked preseason top 6 and have a losing record. 98% of the coaches in the United States had that resume. They would be fired. At what point do we put Jimbo Fisher on the actual hot seat?
They can't, because of the buyout. Like, it's more embarrassing for Texas A&M to fire Jimbo Fisher and have this buyout. And I talked to somebody from the Knight Commission yesterday about buyouts. They've gone up to the point where it's almost irresponsible. And there's going to need, if Jimbo Fisher is fired and that buyout comes out, it's going to hurt college football pretty badly. Like, because then you're going to be like people saying, how are you giving a coach $80 million to go, 3-7? You can't, I don't think they can fire him. I don't think they can justify doing it with that buyout, which is going to trigger a large conversation about buyouts in general. I do think they need to overhaul their entire offense. And as Andy Staples tweeted yesterday, something to the effect of, they need an offensive coordinator that can change that offense and one that Jimbo gives a leash to. Like, I think Andy's tweet was some to the effect of, after 2 games, you pull play calling, dude. No, let it go, like, for a season. And who that offensive coordinator is, I don't know. You saw Miami, like Josh Gaddis, it didn't work. Like, it hasn't worked. And he's gone from Broyles' assistant to, it's offensive coordinator, but they do need they need to change the way they do that. They need to find and develop a quarterback that is a 4 or 5 star guy that like even in the preseason, I wasn't excited about Haynes King and Max Johnson. Like, okay, they're good, they're decent, but those guys aren't winning a national championship. And the off the field stuff starts to add up too. There was some of that, and you get dissent in the locker room. So he's got a long checklist. I just don't think they can do it because that buyout. I'm telling you, it will be more embarrassing for the university, because that's all we'll talk about. We won't talk about Jimbo Fisher getting fired. We'll talk about him walking out the door and how many memes, all those memes we see, Bill. That's what'll happen.
You're right. Very good point. Yeah. I mean, at some point, but I guess we haven't reached that point yet. One final question. You have any anticipated thoughts on tonight's rankings release? Top 5 teams are going to be the same. LSU is going to move to 6. I guess the intrigue is kind of where the Pac-12 teams shake out. USC maybe number 7. But anything else you're looking for tonight?
No, I mean, I think that I'll be looking at the basketball game saying, get the basketball game over so we can see the rankings. That's what college football writers do. I mean, they're like, although they're really good basketball games tonight. So
yes, they are.
So we'll do that, and Mike will be all over it. And, no, I don't think there'll be too many surprises. I think, now it's just TCU has earned their 4 spot. Who do they have in the 5 spot? Tennessee, LSU. So who's that makes 7? Then like you said, where is USC 7?
Probably.
The team, I will say this. I think North Carolina should be higher than they are despite their bad defense, because they only have 1 loss and they have a Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback. They can score on anybody. I would contend that if they played TCU today, it'd be a 38-35 game because they can score on anybody. They just can't stop them. So I think North Carolina should be ranked higher with that 1 loss. But other than that, we'll be all over it. We're looking forward to it. Very
good. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today on our Tuesday podcast. Join us again tomorrow where we would break down these the ranking show and see how everything shakes out. And then Thursday podcast, we will look ahead to USC, UCLA, Oregon, Utah, and the rest of what should be a fun weekend here in college football. Thanks for joining, everybody.